All right. We have the deep state wanting to continue a war with Russia and go even further. We've got new information coming out about the Biden administration, old information that I want to rehash. I have my special guest, Eric Eggers. Eric, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Steven, it's great to be with you. It's really going to be fun, I think.
Yeah, I've got some good stuff to pick your brain on. Just some background. Eric is part of the Drill Down podcast. They've got a newsletter. He's a writer and a political commentator. I saw this morning, this is concerning to me. Corey Lewandowski, an advisor to President Trump, announced that the Biden administration was deliberately leaving captured terrorists off the terrorist list because they were worried it would leak to the media and invading the country with terrorists would look bad for his White House. What are your thoughts on this? Like, this is insane to me. We thought it would look bad that we're letting terrorists into the country. Let's go ahead and hide that from the media and the American people.
Yeah, Steven, I frankly am shocked that the Biden administration would hide something from the American people that they thought would make the Biden administration look bad. That seems so out of character with the way I've understood the Bidens to do business for the last 4 years. Oh, wait, except for that's actually the opposite, right? It's incredibly consistent with the way they like to do business. They hid, in my opinion, the biggest story in American political history, Joe Biden's rapid cognitive decline, or they tried to with the help of a complicit media. So if anything, what I would push back on is Corey Lewandowski's assumption that the media would have reported the story because they clearly didn't report on Joe Biden's cognitive decline. So I'm not real sure that they would have done anything to make Joe Biden look weak, because if there's one thing I've learned in the 12 plus years of working here at the Government Accountability Institute, it doesn't matter how big the story is. If it's potentially beneficial to Donald Trump, the media will bury it.
Wow. I mean, maybe they just wanted to keep it from you, from me, from Fox News, like the right-leaning media that would have, said, oh, here we go. Maybe that's the media that they were hiding it from, not CNN and MSNBC that literally pretended like this guy didn't have yogurt for brains. Maybe it was the right-wing media they buried it from.
Well, that's quite possible. I guess I heard actually Mark Halperin make the point in terms of like the lack of curiosity. And there's a lot of things that let's call it traditional media has been uncurious about as it relates to the Biden presidency, not least of which, by the way, is whatever breakfast food of your choice constituted Joe Biden's brains. The fact is, if he wasn't maybe at the peak capacity, you had his former president, Barack Obama, living in Washington, D.C. and meeting regularly with with White House staff. And it's not like the press took the time to camp outside of his home and figure out what meetings are happening, what meetings are not happening. What influence did the former president, Barack Obama, have on our most recent president? That's, I think, another dramatically unreported story because of a lack of curiosity. But I think as it relates to immigration, you talk about terrorism. No one really reports. It takes the White House to bring the victims of crime, of illegal aliens. They bring them, they put them on the stage at the RNC. They put them on the stage during the White House briefing room. That's the only way the stories, the families of the victims of crimes committed by illegal immigrants actually gets told. You would think that some enterprising reporters would want to go out and cover those stories. That would happen if the opposite was happening, right? If Donald Trump was responsible for the deaths, if his border policies were responsible for the deaths of innocent American lives, those things would be plastered on the front page of media outlets all over the country. So the fact that we don't tell those stories on a regular basis, it doesn't shock me that we then don't tell additional stories, which is, terrorists being let into the country because of lax policies by the Biden administration.
Yeah. Wow. You just brought up a point that I hadn't considered. Over the last 4.5 years, I was covering, Biden's White House time. And, on the internet, I would read, oh, it's really Barack Obama out of a basement. Oh, this is Obama's third term. But then I wouldn't see him going to the White House. He went occasionally, and it was mostly high fives and ignoring Joe Biden. But he was regularly meeting with the staff. And then now we just realized it's the staff that was running the auto pen, the staff that was putting together the bills, the talking points, the invasion of our country. You're now starting to connect some dots for me. Obama didn't have to go to the White House and control Joe Biden. He just talked to the staff members regularly.
Yeah, I mean, if he wanted to talk to Joe Biden, he could have just taken out an ad during Joe Biden's favorite episode of Matlock that aired at 4 o'clock in the afternoon before he hit the sack. But no, I think that there was obviously some communication. Think about this, Stephen. So, people would ask me on a regular basis, as I'm sure they asked you. So, if Joe Biden's kind of not there, as anybody with a brain could see over the last 4 years, then who is running the country? And my answer, not from being connected to any insiders, but just sort of having done some research and understand where the power was, like what the Obama presidency was really about, understanding Eric Holder and understanding what the Department of Justice did under Barack Obama. I said, I think who's running the country are the lawyers that are still in the Department of Justice that became part of the deep state under the Obama administration and remain employed now under the Biden administration. They're the ones that fought and proved the active resistance during the first Trump presidency. And then we actually had Harit Dylan on our podcast just last week. And so, she's now in charge of the Civil Rights Division. And she actually, I think, did an interview with Tucker Carlson. She talked about what a dramatic reality change the employees at the Department of Justice have had since she's taken over. They have crying sessions, they have support groups. And you kind of understand it because, the guy that used to be in her position under Barack Obama was a guy named Tom Perez. And he was later the head of the DNC, but he came from working at nonprofits whose job it was to expand non-citizen voting rights in the United States. And now you have Harit Dylan, who actually represented Donald Trump in his efforts to prove that voter fraud existed and the 2020 election was stolen. So imagine just like having your boss be that different. And so she said that since she's taken over, and I think the last 2 months, 200 lawyers have left her department. So you want to kind of know who was running the country. I think it was them. I think it was the people that were there, and they're like, okay, we don't get to do this anymore, so they're out. And I think that's one of the reasons why we should all be very optimistic about what a Trump presidency can do, but also and guardedly so, because that's one agency. It's a powerful one, and that's just one part of that agency. So the deep state I think is very real, although they are, I think, making some progress. The Trump administration is chipping away at it a little bit at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's she's going to be a really great asset, I believe. She's looking into George Floyd stuff, how there's persecution against whites, the DEI stuff. It'll be really interesting to see what comes out of her investigations.
Yeah, think of this. I mean, she made the point, and I thought it was a great one. Like the statutes haven't changed, right? The laws that govern this country are the same. They're just interpreting them in a very different, and they would say much more correct way than the Biden administration did. They're now, she made a comment, which I thought was really important. She goes, no one on the right has ever played offense on civil rights. Most people just play defense, but they're going on offense. They're fighting to keep trans people out of women's sports. They're fighting to keep anti-Semitism from being on college campuses or maybe from a town in Colorado near you. And, they're fighting to keep people like the mayor of Chicago from openly admitting that they're only hiring based on African Americans. You mentioned George Floyd, Stephen. We actually did. The reason why we had Harit on was because last week was the 5th anniversary of the George Floyd riots. And I was just initially, Peter Schweitzer and I, Peter's the president of this organization who you've had on your show a few times. We were kind of talking about like what has a greater legacy over the last 5 years. Is it COVID? Because 2020 was obviously the summer of COVID. Or was it Black Lives Matter? And we're kind of thinking about all the DEI stuff and how COVID's kind of gone away. And it was just a really interesting question to consider. But in researching that, I came across a story in Minneapolis. They now have a law, which actually Harit Dylan and the Department of Justice are investigating the Hennepin County Attorney's Office for. But they're saying, listen, it's now our policy because of the George Floyd legacy that we have to consider race when it comes to making decisions about charging and or sentencing. So they're literally saying as part of their policy, justice is not blind. In fact, the opposite is true. We have to evaluate your race, your ethnicity, and that's going to inform whether or not we make a decision or how we make a decision on executing criminal justice. So two people who have different races could receive different penalties as a result of only their race. And that's now the official policy. Harit Dylan, the Department of Justice under Donald Trump, says that is insane. That's not okay. It's not American. And they're actually now going to do something about it.
It's not American, but that's what's going on in England right now. They're saying If you commit this crime and you are a Anglo-Saxon British citizen, you go to jail for longer than a person of color that believes in Allah and is Muslim from a third, a third world or a second world nation. It's already happening in England. Now it's coming to America. That's crazy.
It's crazy. And if you're in England and you don't like that policy, you can't say anything on social media about it
Yeah, they
because you
come
can
out
go
and
to
they'll
jail for
arrest you for
that.
that too.
I mean, no, it's wild. And, I heard you say, you talked about kind of your backstory, which I think is important. And I didn't come on here to, you know, give you a lot of plaudits. If anything, I'd like to make fun of you in some way. But what I think is amazing is you realize that starting in 2020, man, the government is so corrupt, and what they're able to now do, it's not just like raising tax rates, right? It's like, no, the way we live our lives is dramatically impacted now by the decisions the government's making. And I think Europe, to your point, is an example. It's like the ghost of Christmas future. It's like, if we don't get a handle on this, then this will be what it looks like. And that's not just some scary show on Netflix. That's our lives. So I think that's actually what people rejected when they've elected Donald Trump. Most recently, they said, "Man, we've seen what giving government this much power can do." And that's so anathema to what the country we fought for and want it to be is. And so I think, hopefully we stay very far away from that. And I think even England's realizing this is way too much. This is insane. And I think that's why you're starting to see like Nigel Farage and those people start to have a little more success, because to choose that is not a popular thing.
Yeah. Well, if you want to take a couple of shots at me, feel free to. I get people saying, "Quit dyeing your hair with shoe polish. Your hair looks fake. Your teeth are big white fake chiclet teeth." So I see it all. I see it all in the comments.
But to be clear, if I do make fun of you, it's going to be much more incisive and emotionally impactful than that, right? In my family, Stephen, conversation is a contact sport, and sarcasm is our love language. So I'm just waiting for you to demonstrate any level of emotional vulnerability, and then I will attack.
Okay. Just to be clear for my audience, you see the light picking up right there? That's actually a bunch of silver and gray hair. So no shoe polish, no shoe polish in this head. So with everything that's happening in the US economy, it feels like we're walking on shaky ground. Prices are stuck at really high levels, and it seems like nothing is affordable anymore. It's no wonder many are relying on credit cards to cover the gaps. Credit card debt is skyrocketing, and it's leaving a lot of people stressed out. If you're a homeowner, you don't have to face this uncertainty alone. My friends at American Financing can help you take control. They can help you access the debt in your home to help you pay down the high interest credit card debt, giving you peace of mind and real saving. On average, people just like you are saving $800 a month. That's $10,000 a year. Plus, they may close your loan in as little as 10 days. Don't let the chaos of the economy get the best of you. Call American Financing now. It costs you nothing to get started, and you might be able to delay 2 mortgage payments, putting some extra cushion in your bank account. Give them a call at 888-686-8030 or visit americanfinancing.net/Gardner. Again, that's 888-686-8030. I want to bring something up on the screen here that I thought was pretty interesting, because on our side of the aisle with Elon Musk, we had to endure them saying, "Oh, this guy is a Nazi because he made a Nazi salute." We've now seen this from Tim Walz. We've seen this from Kamala Harris. We've seen this from so many different Democrats. Now, over the weekend, Cory Bush, he's throwing this baby out there left and right. And yet you're seeing articles saying, well, the difference is Elon Musk is a Nazi. And Senator Cory Booker, he just happened to throw love out to the audience. I don't know if you saw that, but it's amazing how left-leaning media, the exact same movement, One person is love, and the other one, what? He has like a shrine in his house with candles to Adolf Hitler. Your thoughts on that hypocrisy?
Yeah, I don't think anybody that's been paying attention to the coverage of really anything over the last 4.5+ years, or really the last 8+ years, is surprised that there's a double standard in the media. And I don't think they're surprised by the fact that the media will lie to you about one reality as a way to actually cover up the other one. I've got a good story on that, but I'll first just say, I guess I'm surprised that Cory Booker, you called him a senator from New Jersey. I thought he was president already, right? After his big filibuster, he was like now the head of the Democratic Party. He was the leader of the resistance. He was the future. What he had a moment. Did that go away? Now he's just reduced to, I've heard that the Democrats are trying to recruit more white men. I didn't realize having Cory Booker throw up Nazi signs was the way they're going to go about it. I thought they were just going to have more conservatives go on Gavin Newsom's podcast. But this is unfortunately like the 11th millionth example of a story that was never a story. It wasn't a story when Elon Musk did it. It's a hand gesture. People do it. And I think the fact that Cory Booker can do it and you receive none of the vilification just shows you that it wasn't a story when Elon Musk did it either.
Yeah, they took a molehill, turned it into a mountain. But, he is a Black American converted Jew. He would never do anything like that because he votes Democrat. But yeah, we see through the hypocrisy. The only thing that came out of Cory Booker talking for 24 hours was a book deal. So he's going to now become a multimillionaire, not because he did any good for the American people, certainly nothing for his own voters, but he got a book deal worth millions of dollars. So congratulations, Mr. Booker.
Hey, so check this out. We actually looked into this a while ago, and I know that government corruption is something that you're interested in, and that's actually, what we exist to do here at the Government Accountability Institute. We, started, and obviously when Joe Biden became president, we'd been reporting on the stories with Hunter Biden, his business deals for a long time, and that became something that sucked up a lot of oxygen. But the interesting thing about Cory Booker and his book deal, and I didn't know that he'd signed that, and I don't, if you know how much he signed it for, I'm interested, but. So, you've heard the stories about these big multimedia corporations, and they're kind of letting some people go because they're trying to get these mergers approved by the Trump administration. But low key, paying $1 million advances to politicians is one of the few ways that you can still buy legally a politician. And why I think it's interesting, if he did get a big advance, is his streaming numbers for that speech were not big. Like they were putting out tweets like 24,000 people are watching this in real time. And I was like, that's it. Like maybe that's a decent night for MSNBC, but for anybody else, that's not a significant number. So if he was able to parlay that into a really big book deal, that's really interesting. And I'd be interested in which publishing company and if they have business before the Senate or business in some way that Cory Booker might be helpful on.
It won't be. I'm sure it's the same group that offered the Governor Cuomo. Oh, you gave the best speeches. You deserve an Emmy for how you talk about COVID and badmouth President Trump, orange face Trump, not doing enough. All he did was bring in a Navy ship that you guys completely ignored. All he did was try to keep COVID sick people out of nursing homes, but you were smart enough to stick them in there. And then he gets this book deal. It's probably the same group. I don't even know. Cory Booker matters so little to my life that I only brought him up. Actually, you brought him up. So anyway, he does nothing for his voters, just like most Democrat politicians. He doesn't do anything for them. So.
No, you're absolutely right. And by the way, mentioning Cuomo, so I live in Florida, and I have, I think like you, 3 small children, or I have 3 children. I'm not sure how old your children are. And so, COVID for us was a really big deal. You got 3 kids at home, and I'll forever be grateful for the leadership that Ron DeSantis showed and the fact that our life was able to return to some semblance of normalcy as quickly as it was. But being a Floridian and knowing what my reality was and what the reality was for my family, my kids and their schooling and what they were able to still do. And then seeing the way that New York was covered when they were having outcomes that were far worse. And, not just in terms of the nursing home deaths, but in terms of keeping schools closed and everything else. And the way that he was lauded and Ron DeSantis was vilified and treated like he was this threat to humanity, I thought was maybe one of the more egregious examples of media hypocrisy and double standards that exists. And oh, by the way, you talk about stories that weren't covered with, I think, the voice and energy that they deserve to be, probably because that happened while Joe Biden was still president and had ramifications for the election in 2024. But there's a study that showed the schools that were run by Democrats, including California and New York, with two presumptive presidential hopefuls in 2028 with Cuomo and Newsom, they lost 2 decades worth of learning gains because they stayed closed for so long. And those learning gains dramatically impacted disproportionately the Black and brown communities because they didn't have computers at home. They didn't have quiet, safe spaces to learn. So all that to say, those people that did such a poor job of leading states like Governor Cuomo during COVID, it's even worse than you think, because the stories that still haven't been told are how jacked up those states' school systems are and how bad those kids' futures will be because of those decisions that they made.
Yeah. Oh, don't get me started on the COVID crap. Let me switch gears with you. Former President Bill Clinton said he never once saw Biden struggle or unable to do his job. Yes, he worried about his age, but he did a good job. He was a good president. How big is the lie out of Bill Clinton's mouth? Like I had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Joe Biden was a good president. Like, I don't know which one's more credible. Your thoughts?
I mean, this is how many lies Bill Clinton's told. You didn't even reference the "I did not have sex with that woman." So, I mean, that's like Bill Clinton's been telling whoppers for days. You can't believe Bill Clinton. I guess in some ways, the one way you can believe Bill Clinton is the idea that he's been very honest about his need to make money in his post-presidential life. And the fact that, he was taking money from his business partners, people would pay him to give speeches. We did reporting on the dramatic increase in the interest in his speaking and the amount of money he was able to make when Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State, as opposed to when she was just a senator in New York. But Bill Clinton is the latest to, I think, cover for Joe Biden. The Obamas, you kind of understand those people have no loyalty for Joe Biden. I think they didn't really like him. They kind of wish they weren't saddled with him as vice president. So you understand why the George Clooney's and the rest of the Pod Save America bros and all those guys, they turned very quickly. A lot of people blame Joe Biden for the fact that they lost last year. The Clintons are like, we've lost to Trump before. It's not really any skin off our back. And so, you kind of expect it. They value loyalty over the truth. And I mean, look at how Bill and Hillary have managed to stay together.
Yeah, bless his heart for staying with her. I have to imagine it's not really a romantic relationship anymore. Just a quick side note, I learned in the last 10 days that the government spent more money investigating Monica Lewinsky than they did 9/11, but what do I know?
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Wait, you
Yeah,
can't just drop. You can.
That's a big one. Yeah, more money was spent on the Russia collusion fake narrative. More money was spent on the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky than on the 9/11 investigation. But
Hey, I've heard, I mean, it's your show, so go wherever you want to, but I've heard you talk about the Russiagate stuff before. Do you know where that came from? Like, do you know why the Clinton campaign decided they needed to fabricate the Russiagate narrative?
They were probably just bitter, and the fact that her email scandal was threatening to send her to jail. I think she was actually, this is just my opinion, I think she was actually okay with losing the presidency once she realized she could actually go to jail for what she did with the email servers and all that. That's just my opinion.
Okay, well, so this what I'm about to tell you is stuff that has been validated and verified by the Columbia Journalism Review. It's been, vetted by reporters from lots of different outlets, and it's come from even internal Clinton campaign documents. So we actually did a book called Clinton Cash that came out in 2015. Actually, it was the 10-year anniversary of its release on Cinco de Mayo. And that's the book that explored the relationship between people that gave money to the Clinton Foundation when Hillary was Secretary of State and paid for speeches for Bill Clinton when she was Secretary of State. And there was this Uranium One deal that the New York Times reported on, and then we kind of built upon it. But basically, the Kremlin gave $500,000 for Bill Clinton to give a speech, and people that were involved in the sale of uranium donated hundreds of millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, while Vladimir Putin was ultimately able to acquire this uranium. And so this was a big book, came out, did a lot of news. The New York Times reported on it, the Washington Post, ABC News, Bloomberg. It was a big deal. And the Clintons said, oh my gosh, like, people think we are Russian agents. Also, when she was Secretary of State, she'd worked with Vladimir Putin. They set up this thing like the Russian Silicon Valley called Skolkovo, and John Podesta was taking money from a company that was involved over there. So they were dirty with Russia. And they said, we've got this real problem. So they paid Mark Elias, who was their campaign attorney, to go out and hire, right, these investigators, these former spies, to fabricate the Russian narrative and then give it to the mainstream media outlet. But it's because they knew they had a Russia problem. So they said, all right, so if we are the ones that have a Russia problem, let's make Donald Trump have a Russia problem. And it was a big lie. But the media went with it because it was good for Clinton and bad for Trump. But it was because they knew they had a problem that they decided to kind of create the whole story, and it worked. And actually, I think you can connect dots that they were successful at doing that. You wonder, like, why would Joe Biden think that they could hide his cognitive decline? Why would they think they can lie about so many things that they've lied about for the last 10 years? It's because they were able to lie about that. And if you can get away with that, then, like, what else can you get away with?
Oh, that's actually really interesting, because everybody talks about, we don't want to go to war with Russia because they have more nuclear weapons than us. And then it's Hillary Clinton that gives them the uranium they need in order to blow up the world in the future. That's why. Let me stay on that topic with you, because want to get your thoughts on the Russia-Ukraine war. On the one hand, we keep hearing that they want to bring this thing to an end. And then over the weekend, they do the single biggest attack on Russia since World War II. It was this huge espionage attack with hidden drones all attacking at the same time. They're calling this the Pearl Harbor of Russia, where billions of dollars of military equipment was wiped out. That sure doesn't sound like someone that wants to bring a war to an end. Your thoughts?
So, what we do at the Government Accountability Institute is we kind of look at, like, what are some things that everybody agrees are problems, right? And we try to do this on a weekly basis on our podcast. So what are some things that everybody thinks are problems? And, like, well, if everybody agrees that they're problems, then how come they're not being solved? And usually the reason is because the status quo is too profitable for entities that are too powerful. I mean, bottom line. So I'm not a military tactician, but I do understand math, and I understand how much money is going to lots of different entities that are profiting off of the continuation of this Ukraine-Russia war, not the least of which are a significant number of United States defense companies. And I just remember this, Stephen. I remember, I think it was like 2022, and they were trying to pass some budget continuation bill in Congress. And Mitch McConnell said that the number one priority, his rationale for approving whatever the continuation was, the continuing budget resolution that kind of funded everything. And he goes, look, the number one priority for Republican voters is ensuring Ukraine's sovereignty and defense. And I was like, which Republican voters is he talking to? Because I don't believe that. Like, I think people are genuinely pro-life and they want people to be safe and survive. I don't know that continuing to fund Ukraine's defense, and not just the defense, right, but like their social service systems, and we're paying for their, I think, social safety net benefits, and then we're paying for all kinds of stuff, right? Small businesses. And I think I've heard you say that it doesn't make sense to most people's brains. Why does it make more sense for our money to go over there than here? And so, it just tells me that they need to keep the system moving, to keep the money moving. And the war continuing is good for a lot of businesses' bottom lines.
I mean, I know they don't want to solve diabetes because there's too much money in it. I know they don't want to solve cancer because there's too much money in it. And I know they don't want to solve this war because there's too much damn money in it. But Americans, we're done. We don't want war. Like, look at the new Trump doctrine. America tried to come over to the Middle East and tell you how to live. We spent $9 trillion and got nothing for it. You used that same money to build your society. Now there's no homeless people. You've got all this great infrastructure. You're one of the richest nations in the world. Like, but this is what America does. So the fact that Lindsey Graham is over there right now with Blumenthal saying, we're going to hit you with everything we got. We need to amplify the war, 500% increase, sanctions so that you can't breathe. They're gearing up for war. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, all of them. They want war. Why? Because Donald Trump doesn't want war and because there's too much money in it.
Hey, and contrast it, talk about the Trump doctrine, contrast it with Trump, with what Trump said in his trip to the Middle East. And I think it was his speech in Qatar. He literally said, like, we're not trying to sell you or impose our culture onto you. We're trying to do business with you because you guys are good at business within your own culture. It's a dramatic shift from the Bush administration, right? And what we're going to do in terms of like fighting for democracy and everything else, and just quickly back to what you said. You said we spent more money investigating Lewinsky than 9/11. Two words for you: Saudi Arabia. Okay, so we're not really that interested in investigating certain countries, and because they have a lot of power and they have important relationships. But all that to say, like, yeah, you're right. That represents, to me, and I'm no expert, but the Ukraine-Russia war represents an old way of thinking about the world that's very different than the way Donald Trump thinks about the world. And there's a lot of companies that have made a lot of money on the old way of thinking about it and the funding that old way of thinking about it. And I think that's kind of, that tension is what you're seeing play out in real time.
Yeah, it really is a different way of thinking about money and funding. For example, previous presidents have tried to theoretically make America great again, or at least good enough so that other countries will buy our bonds, right? And Trump is saying, no, 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 no. You got to buy the American engine and invest directly in companies and industries and sectors. And that's why we're now seeing $10 trillion plus flow in. So you have Bush and Clinton and Obama, trillions of dollars go out the door in war. Under Trump, he's trying to bring in peace. Now you've got trillions of dollars coming in the form of capital and investment and new jobs and chasing the future versus chasing the past. It's such a difference in thinking.
It is. And I have to say, I don't know that it's one that I thought he would be able to achieve as quickly as he has. And I know people want to kind of focus on, oh, well, the markets are up and down, and you're saying tariffs one day and then you're kind of not the next. But I will say, like, if you just think about it, he's been president for what, 5 months? Less than 5 months. So less than half of a pregnancy, and how dramatically different the world markets look. The fact that you've got so many countries coming to us to negotiate, asking for some kind of a deal. The fact that you're able to have different conversations about lots of different topics that used to be completely off the table. I heard playwright David Mamet say on Bill Maher's show, I guess just over the weekend, that he thinks the 2020 election was stolen. And I'm like, man, I'm old enough to remember when you got deplatformed for saying that and or sued. So it just shows you that he's standing up for things that most people, I think, they make sense to him. They make sense to them. They make sense to us. And there's space now to be able to, it's like, yeah, like what, even the conversation you're having about Ukraine and Russian, should our money go there? People are like, no, that's our money. It's our priorities. This is insane. It's not good for the American people. It's good for some American companies. Let's stop it. And that's a view that Donald Trump not only agrees with, but fights for every day. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, I'm personally waiting for him to just cut off all taxpayer money and weapons to Ukraine. When he did that the first time, all of a sudden NATO and Europe, they wanted peace. He turned it back on. What did they do? They immediately start firing deep into Russia, and now this attack. I just think at some point he's going to have to do America first and cut off the money. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, don't you think that's kind of a budgeting or a negotiating tactic, though? Like, he's trying to get this big, beautiful bill passed. So I think they're all leverage points, and that's one thing I've sort of noticed. I think he is, he wrote the book, The Art of the Deal. I think he has proven himself to be an adept negotiator, and what adept negotiators I think do is collect as many leverage points as possible. So it wouldn't shock me if at some point the Ukraine funding is used as leverage to get his budget bill passed.
Mm, interesting. Okay. Yeah. That's a good point. Eric, this has been a great conversation. We could probably go on and on, but I like to keep it around 30 minutes. The mind can only absorb what the butt can endure, so we'll be respectful of the audience. If people want to find you and listen to your podcast or your writings, where can I point them towards?
First, I have to write down that phrase. The mind can only absorb what the butt can endure. That
Yes.
is that a Stephen Gardner original?
No, somebody taught me that. They said, "Hey, keep your meetings brief because the mind can only absorb as much as the butt can endure." Because I mean, how many times you've been sitting there, your butt falls asleep, or you're like, you start wandering, you want to search your phone or whatever. Meetings become kind of useless. So it stuck with me. It's one reason I try to keep my show on the shorter end.
No, that's amazing, and I think that that's real. That's forget the Ukraine talk. That's life changing wisdom from Stephen Gardner right there. Great job. But if people want to find out more about what we do, you can go to thedrilldown.com. Peter Schweitzer and I do a podcast every week where we try to unpack like government corruption and expose things that are happening. And as we talked about, like explore like who's making money off of it, how many times has the government lied to you, and we try to give you information you kind of can't find anywhere else. So you can find that podcast at thedrilldown.com or wherever you find podcasts, like that you happen to like. So, but yeah, it was awesome, dude. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. We'll do it again, but I'll make sure to put that direct link so that people can find you. Thanks for all that you do. I love what you and Seamus and Peter are doing. I get asked all the time, do you do your podcast because you love politics? I say, no, I do it because I find politics disgusting. So it brings me great joy to shine light on corruption on both sides. It's on both sides. So anyway, I really appreciate all that you guys do with your website, your newsletter, and your podcast. So I'll go ahead and put those direct links down below. Eric, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Hey, thanks. Same to you and your audience. See you later.